All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about the sling system. It's a term that's being thrown around the golfing world, and I'm fortunate enough to have Andrew Bolter here to kind of explain what that is and why that's important. All right, Andrew, so the sling system.
Yes.
It's a combination of the internal and external obliques, correct?
Yep.
Now tell them why it's important, because this is a term that is starting to get thrown around the golfing world a lot.
It is. It's becoming very popular in general, which I love to see. So the sling system is basically a way to describe the way that the body organizes movement. So traditional anatomy has really popularized this idea of just basically there's different muscles that are connected to bones. So we've got the bicep, we've got the forearm extensors and flexors, we've got the tricep, we've got the shoulder. Okay, so that'd be a typical kind of anatomical description of the arm, okay? But we actually have two major arm lines. We have the front arm line and we have the back arm line. Those comprise sling systems in the body. So what that's saying is that the tissues along the arm are actually all kind of encapsulated in fascia and interpenetrated by fascia. And this fascia essentially makes all of these tissues move in coherence. So when somebody's throwing a punch, they're not thinking about, oh, I'm gonna flex and extend my bicep. They're using their nervous system to coordinate a complex movement that is then executed by an entire swath of tissue. So sling systems is a broad umbrella term that describes a lot of different sub-sling systems in the body. Josh was alluding to some of the spiral line slings that basically start on the outside of one leg and spiral up the body, exiting the opposite hand. You've got deep front lines, superficial front lines, deep back lines, superficial back lines. Basically what these are all talking about is certain tracts of myofascia, meaning muscles and fascia, as well as the nervous system, coordinating these big parts of tissue together to coordinate walking, running, swinging a golf club.
So let's talk about how that relates to a golf swing,
Sure.
okay? Now, you know, obviously in previous videos we talked about engaging the TVA. Yep. I think ultimately what you were getting at in simple terms is that the body is connected by different fabric. Yep. That basically runs from your feet all the way to you know, your head or your arms, however you want to look at it. Yep. But basically stuff isn't moving by itself. Correct. It's all kind of interconnected. And if you understand how to move your trunk correctly, you can create the appropriate reactions in the rest of the body. Okay, so correct. When we set up, obviously we want to draw our core back a little bit, engage the TVA. As we wind up to the top, okay, what's kind of happening? Like, let's talk about as I kind of wind up. Is it more the posterior or the anterior oblique that's kind of winding up?
So they're actually both winding up. So as Josh is going into his backswing or his takeaway, he's loading up a lot of slings. The golf swing is complex and it actually is leveraging almost every single sling system during the full movement. So as Josh is bringing his arms back, he is creating potential energy, stored energy in those sling systems, in the anterior obliques subsystem, in the posterior oblique subsystem, in the spiral lines. He's loading all of those up. That myofascia is stretching and loading energy, and as he swings through, he's unloading that energy ultimately through his hands.
So basically, if I had a rubber band from my left hip to kind of my right shoulder, and I was really winding up, I would essentially be kind of lengthening that band, correct?
Yep, and that's a simplified version. Actually, that rubber band really would start all the way at his foot and go all the way out his opposite hand. But to understand it conceptually, it's definitely fine to understand it just in terms of the trunk. There is a rubber band here being tensioned and then unleashed as he swings through the swing.
Right, so basically where this is kind of getting at, and there's an importance to this because it translates to rotation. Correct. So if I'm set up and we kind of imagine that rubber band from the left hip to the right shoulder and I wind up to the top and that starts to really kind of load all of that. And then as I start to kind of separate and create, separate and transition, that's basically kind of maxing that out to full capacity, right? So it's not quite maxed out at the top, it's maxing out once we're kind of loaded through the transition. Now that rubber band's loaded, Okay, so talk about what happens like once all of that stuff gets loaded in terms of creating kind of a stretch reflex to get everything firing from there.
Yep, so you alluded to it. So you are basically creating a big stretch reflex through those tissues. So humans utilize fascia really, really efficiently. That's what makes us be able to move really efficiently and powerfully in this instance. So.
And I think a good example of that, and this is kind of a dumb little trick that kind of goes around, is like if you try to tap your finger real fast,
Yep.
versus I can only go a certain speed, but if you actually pull it back, it's going to fling a lot faster.
Yep.
That's because this is being tensioned and loaded to where it's creating a reflex.
Exactly.
Same thing we want to do in the golf swing is we want to understand how to wind our body up to load that tissue so that it basically does the most amount of work with the least amount of effort.
Correct, correct. And to do that, you really need to understand how to actually load those systems. So if you don't understand how to use the TVA, if you haven't practiced these movements a lot, or you're doing training that's somewhat disconnecting you from these systems, it can be more difficult. So that's where training that emulates these movements can be really helpful in terms of enhancing your ability and your proprioception, or your kind of internal awareness of how you're moving your body. It can really enhance your ability to execute it on the golf course.
Yeah, really, really important. I think, for me, that's where I started seeing huge jumps. I mean, this is the Hit Bombs YouTube channel, so let's correlate this to speed. When I was winding, the better I got at being able to wind my body up, and then create separation, that basically allowed this to create a huge stretch through the transition.
Correct.
Which basically, in my opinion, once I get to about here and that's all stretched, it's essentially a big catapult. And then it's just a big, it just basically springs and kind of catapults me to the finish. It's kind of how I think about it.
Yep. I think a whip actually is even maybe a slightly better analogy if you think about the hand being kind of like the feet and the hips, and the tip of the whip being the end of the golf club. You've got this kind of latency, and you can see the wave of energy ride through that whip and eventually crack the whip at the end. That's the striking of the ball.
Right. Yeah, and I think one of the things that has kind of been thrown around the golfing world in the past was the idea of like an X factor, okay?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of, it's a very debatable topic. I think traditionally where the X factor kind of came from was that you wanted to kind of brace your lower body, take it completely out of the equation, and then wind up your body kind of against that.
Yep.
And I wouldn't quite say that's how I try to do it. Like, I'm trying to still allow myself to wind up. I think that in terms of being able to load this tissue correctly, there's definitely a sequence to it. Like, you don't want to let your pelvis over rotate too quick to where then you can't actually wind up your low upper body. But at the same time, you're not restricting the pelvis to where it doesn't allow you to really wind up at the same time.
Yep.
Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really any complex movement, there is definitely a sequencing and timing involved. And I think refining your understanding of that sequencing and timing through training will allow you to harness that sequencing and timing much more effectively during the swing.
So a good example of this in the swing is, I'll jump to the down the line view, is if I set up, okay, basically, if I start to turn back and my pelvis starts to turn too fast, I'm really not getting to the tissue of my core. Okay, this is turning pretty much at club shaft parallel in the backswing. If we start to see too much space between the legs, I know that my upper body's not really winding up, and then there's really that line that we're talking about from the left hip to right shoulder, for simplicity reasons, is not really being lengthened.
Correct.
And so, like you said, a lot of times it's just understanding how to move, where to move from, and then understanding the sequencing of it that actually allows you to load this stuff efficiently.
Exactly.
So, guys, I think that was a really great video and a really important video. Beautiful description by Andrew. Andrew, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on my Instagram, _vital_pursuit. You can also check out my website, vitalpursuit.co.co. Got a great foundation level course there that'll teach you all about the stuff we're talking about. And if you want to know more and in depth about sling systems, check out Anatomy Trains by Thomas Myers. He goes as deep as you want to know about the sling system.
Yeah, I actually purchased the book, and I mean, it was deep for me. I'm taking it slowly. But guys, we also have new Nike long sleeve shirts on the website. Get those before they sell out. Christmas is right around the corner, so give the gift that keeps on giving. But other than that, Andrew, thank you for coming out here today.
You.
And we got one more good video planned for you guys.